In 1897, Frank Hann discovered a lake which he believed to be Australia's inland sea, the colonists' fantasy. Unfortunately, the lake was saltwater, halting his dream before it even had a chance of existing. To represent his disappointment, he had named the lake Lake Disappointment. Of course, Frank Hann wasn't the first to find or name the lake. Many years earlier, the indigenous Martu people had found the lake and had felt the same sense of palpable disappointment at its saltwater state, so they had named it Kumpupintil. But the Martu were in a much more dire position than Frank Hann. Hann had food reserves for weeks, funding from the Australian government, and a plan to expedition for another 6 years. But for the Martu, whole tribes and communities shared intangible levels of disappointment. How could they hope to survive in such an arid area with no sign of drinkable water nearby? They did, of course, survive. They hunted and gathered, and they became experts at finding drinkable water in this landscape. But there was a pure fear associated with the barren land around Kumpupintil. The disappointment and uncertainty of food sources had made itself manifest. During the creation of the earth, cannibalistic creatures named Ngayurnangalku had lived all over the western desert. They all coalesced at Kumpupintil, and there they debated. Should we stop eating people? Some of them decided yes, and they moved on. They live in freshwater springs throughout Western Australia now. The ones who didn't want to stop eating people stayed at Kumpupintil. Under the water, they reside in their own realm where the sun never sets. They resemble people a lot, aside from pointy teeth and sharp fingernails, which they use to grip humans who wander too close to the lake. The Martu people who pass by Kumpupintil do so quickly, and they do so quietly, so that no Ngayurnangalku are made aware of their presence. Why did the Martu imagine such a terrifying man-eating beast? Ngayurnangalku roughly translates to "they will eat me", and it is a mythological manifestation of Martu concerns. They represent worries about the lake and the landscape's hostility, an uncertainty about where the next meal may come from. With food options so sparse, there were concerns that played in the back of the heads of the Martu people. However quietly, there was one question burning in their heads. Will I have to eat my friends to ensure my own survival? Or will my friends have to eat me to ensure their own survival? There is no record that the Martu people have ever been cannibals. In fact, their fear of the Ngayurnangalku demonstrates a cultural revulsion of cannibalism. It is something that they regard as quite literally unhuman. But the lake, and the western desert around it, had fostered fears of what scarcity may make necessary. A fear of both the landscape around them, and of what this landscape may make their friends do, was anthropomorphized into the Ngayurnangalku. Halfway across the world, several hundred years before, the Anglo-Saxons lived with an identical fear of their landscape. Boggy meres with poisoned water were totally unsafe places to be, and they could pose a very real threat from who knows what. Likewise, Anglo-Saxons worried about war and famine. These were human threats that were understood, but they were equally terrifying. The Anglo-Saxons were anthropomorphizing their threat as well, and they named him Grendel. He lived in a shallow lake, and he threatened instability to the realm. When Frank Hann saw and named Lake Disappointment, he, like most of Western society, felt total disdain for the Aboriginals and their fear of the lake. However, he and we live in a world based on logic and reason, a world where we can separate our fears and we can understand the unknown. Most integrally, we both live in a world where we don't need to worry about our food supply. We know where our next meal will come from. The monsters served an important purpose. They could tell children where not to go, the briny depths of Kumpupintil, the boggy waters of the mere, but they also outline a society's moral code, whether this is a revulsion of greed, cannibalism, or social discontent. Thanks for watching. This is the second part of a 2-part series. Click the video on the left to see the first part. The video on the right is what YouTube wants you to watch. Please let me know what you thought of this video in the comments below. It helps me to improve my content. Lastly, like, subscribe and ring the bell if you want more stuff like this. Have a good day.